What's up, everybody? Thunder Bay personal trainer Logan Blake here. Today we're going to be debunking Aajonus Vonderplanitz. He is the creator of the Primal Diet. Aajonus Vonderplanitz was born John Richard Swigert. So he decided, his name was John, and he thought it was a good idea to change his name to Aajonus Vonderplanitz. He was born April 17th, 1947 in Denver, Colorado, and he died August 28th, 2013. He was an American nutritionist and activist in Malibu, California, and in Thailand, and he developed the Primal Diet. Vonderplanitz claimed that in his 20s, he was diagnosed with multiple terminal cancers, all resistant to conventional treatments, but he reversed them all through raw meat. Increasingly popular, the Primal Diet is principled on raw meat, raw eggs, raw dairy, raw bland fruit, raw coconut cream, and unheated honey. He wrote 2 books, We Want to Live and The Recipe for Living Without Disease. Aajonus fell from his second-story balcony at his home in Thailand when it gave way. He suffered a broken spine and internal bleeding and was taken to the hospital where he died. Sounds like a tragic accident, just like the Atkins guy. I wonder if they checked him for clogged arteries. So here's food for thought. If eating raw meat is so good for you, how do we explain all the people that have died or gotten sick from E. coli, listeria, botulism, stegospores, salmonella, and campylobacteria from eating animal products or foods contaminated with animal products? So through my research on Aajonus, I came across this website here where somebody reviewed one of his novels, and they say that in the book, Aajonus claims that you should be eating green bananas over the ripe ones. You shouldn't wait until the fruit is ready. Sweet fruit is bad. You should pick it before it's ready, and then it's healthier. Okay, and the second thing, he says you should be eating white bread baguettes. How is white bread primal? It also says here he has a self-appointed PhD in nutrition. I don't know how you self-appoint yourself a PhD. I would like to do that. I mean, that seems pretty easy. Just to skip school and be like, I got a PhD? I don't know how that works. No wonder people look up to this guy. He has a huge cult following. He's like some kind of superhero. Captain Aajonus Vonderplanitz. Tra-la-la! So the guy that did the book review lives in Australia, and he says that Aajonus came to Australia last year and gave a talk in Robina. Obviously this is old because Aajonus died in 2013. He says he knew 3 people that attended, and they shared how Aajonus was sick from food poisoning the whole time. He had to cut his talk off early, and he spent the day and night vomiting in a bathtub and over the side of a balcony. When he was questioned what was wrong, Aajonus said, I was poisoned by the Thai mafia. Aajonus also charged one of his friends $400 Australian for a 1-hour consultation. Aajonus looked at his scalp and said, you have a very rare fungal infection and you need to consume no water, eat green bananas, and put pinholes in some eggs and leave them on a windowsill for 30 to 40 days until they turn black and then eat them. So my friend did that and ended up in the hospital with an IV filled with antibiotics and steroids in order to fight the infection that was raging through his throat and lymph glands. One of the claims that Aajonus makes in his book is that he had 300 heart attacks by the time he was 22 years old. I don't even see how that's possible. That's almost a heart attack a day for like a year. So as I mentioned earlier, Aajonus died when a balcony collapsed, and he fell to the ground and he broke his back quite severely next to the first rib, and he couldn't move his legs. He went to the hospital, but he took over. He wouldn't let the doctors take more than one x-ray. He made the doctors feed him food. He made the doctors wrap his torso in a certain way. He wouldn't accept pain shots. Soon, he started regurgitating all his food and all the blood in his stomach. Then he went into a coma and then later on died, all because of stubbornness. So eating raw meat isn't even the craziest part. It's not only raw, but Aajonus sticks the meat inside of jars and then leaves it on the counter, rotting, collecting more bacteria for like a month. And he was on the show Ripley's Believe It or Not because his diet is so crazy and absurd. So through my research on the Primal Diet, I was looking up websites and I found this one called The Primal Parent. And it teaches all about primal pregnancy and primal parenting. I guess they want you to feed your kids raw meat and eat raw meat when you're pregnant. I mean, that sounds perfectly safe. I found this book on the website called Primal Mums Look Good Naked. I guess when you eat raw meat, it gives you a perfect physique. For more on Aajonus Vonderplanitz and the Primal Diet, here's fellow YouTuber Planton.
You went strict vegan for a while. What were some of the consequences you were seeing for your body?
Well, because I had anemia, the blood cancer and the bone cancer.
Right.
I didn't have to be on it but 2.5 years before I went down to 98 pounds. My bones started disintegrating. I got leukemia again.
That sounds like a caloric problem. If you're losing weight, dropping weight so rapidly, you're not eating enough calories.
I was living on a bicycle outdoors, which is very stressful. The temperature changes from day to night. Can be.
Once again, what does that have to do with a vegan diet? Once again, this seems like a calorie problem.
But living in that as a fruitarian, strict fruitarian, no lacto, no ovo, no meats at all, I disintegrated heavily.
Well, if you're eating just fruit, is that enough calories? Also, what about vegetables? You didn't claim that you ate vegetables. You could get calcium from vegetables, higher in protein.
The next night, they killed a jackrabbit and offered it to me, ripped it up and put it at my feet. And, I was also a philosophical vegetarian because I left animals.
Yeah.
Just like a child, if a child sees an animal, its first instinct isn't to kill it, it's probably to pet it.
So I made deals with different farmers to milk their cows or goats, shovel manure, any work on the farms in exchange for all the food I wanted. So I was drinking a gallon of raw milk a day, eating anywhere from a stick to 2 sticks of butter a day, which is a quarter to half a pound of butter a day.
So once again, of course you're going to gain weight because you're eating high fatty foods. And fat is very calorically dense. What do you expect?
And chicken and eggs and everything I could eat. And within 2.5 months, I gained 50 pounds.
Wow.
Obviously, it's called a caloric surplus. You could do the same thing on a vegan diet, just eat more. If anything, eat more fruit, eat more vegetables, have some oatmeal in the morning.
And I looked like a scaled Arnold Schwarzenegger, the first time in my life that I had muscles.
Anyways, this guy was basically starving himself. He was just eating fruit, obviously not enough fruit. He wasn't eating any vegetables, and all of a sudden he started to eat raw milk and butter, and he gained weight. He ate a dead rabbit, and he thinks that's the miracle to life. But really, when he was vegan, he did it all wrong. He was just eating way under his maintenance calorie. So I'm going to turn it over to Conscientious Omnivore to finish off this video. Peace, guys.
Thanks, Planton. Thanks, Logan. After such a thorough debunking, I was at first thinking like, man, what am I going to find on this guy to actually contribute something, interesting and, something that you guys haven't covered. But then you start looking into this guy's wacky stuff that he said, and there's just so much outrageously, just bald-faced lies that this guy says that it's almost like it's a gold mine of craziness to go through. So, my first, kind of thing that I'm going to jump to is everybody's favorite, raw meat eating person probably is our friend Sverige. Sverige has some, great inspiration from Aajonus, and I've already done a debunking video about him, so if you haven't seen that, go over to Logan's channel and watch that. But there's some crazy stuff in this great compilation that he's put together. You can listen to it. I picked out a few choice moments here. Let's start with this first spot.
These minerals are very beneficial in trace amounts. The high mercury in flying fish and swordfish is very important for their buoyancy. Without that mercury, they could never reach the heights that they do. The flying fish would never be able to fly without that mercury.
That's great. So fish need mercury to be buoyant, so they can float in the water. They don't use theirs, like fish bladders, where it helps them, float around in the water and go up and down because they change the amount of air they have in their body. No. It's not a bladder. They use mercury to stay buoyant. Interesting, because mercury, the last time I checked, if you look at the specific density of mercury, it's 13.56 times as dense as water, meaning it weighs more for the same amount of volume. So therefore, if you put mercury into your body, you're going to be less likely to float. It will certainly not help you, be able to fly out of the water and be more buoyant, as Mr. Aajonus Vonderplanitz claims here. So just crazy stuff like this. It's like any bit of digging around, you can just immediately find just like how crazy this guy is. I don't know. It's just like I rarely want to, just get this upset when I try to do like a debunking. But anyway, this guy is just another level. Okay, next, he's in that same interview, he's talking about how mercury is mercury, what do you call it? Like your body will store mercury more from the effects of smoking marijuana. So check out what he says and just listen.
You have 16 times more tars in marijuana than you do in a cigarette. So of course that held on to the mercury, spread it throughout his system. I had one child that at 15 and a half, he saw these drug dealers hide 4 kilos of grass. So he stole it for the next year and a half, or year and 9 months he smoked it. Took him a whole year and 9 months to smoke it with his friends, and he had the largest amount of cancer, mercury in the brain I'd ever seen. And
so in case you missed it, sorry, I had the volume kind of set wrong, but anyway, he's saying that marijuana has 16 times the amount of tar in it than tobacco, and because of this additional tar, when you smoke it, your body holds on to mercury at a higher rate. So first he's telling you that mercury in small amounts is not a problem, keep eating fish. Then, because it'll help the fish jump out of the water and all this kind of stuff, and in trace amounts it's not a problem. But then he's saying that it is a problem when it's too much. So it's like, okay, well, too much of a good thing can be a bad thing, fine. But he's saying smoking marijuana is going to get your body to absorb and retain too much mercury. So he gives this example of this boy who came to him, who at the age of 15 had basically stolen 4 kilos of grass off of drug dealers, and he smoked it over the course of 1 year and 9 months. And even this, the way he tells the story, if you ever look at somebody who's a liar, just a compulsive liar, they're making up stories on the spot. This guy is a classic case of that. It's he can't even keep his little thing straight of it's 4 kilos of grass. It took him a year and 9 months to smoke it, but then he's a year and 3 months, a year and a half. He can't even remember the details, and it's okay, these are kind of insignificant. Maybe it's just nothing, but it's just one of these things where you can almost feel he's making up the story as he goes along, and he just says crazy stuff. So then, he jumps through a whole bunch of hoops. He's talking about how sick the kid is, and he came to him, his mom was looking after him, he couldn't even move. He had the worst case of mercury poisoning that he'd ever seen. So listen to this next section here. Let me check the volume. Yeah.
so this kid had 4 kilos of mercury contamination. Well, you notice they haven't.
The kid had 4 kilos of mercury contamination. I think it's literally he's screwing up his own story. He's remembering the 4 kilos of drugs. of the actual marijuana, but he's saying that he had 4 kilos of mercury poisoning. You look up like what a lethal dose of mercury poisoning is. It is 1 to 4 grams, not kilos, 1 to 4 grams, and then it says per kilogram body weight. So this is like, you know, they're just telling you that 14 to 57 milligrams per kilogram body weight for a 70 kilogram person. So it's like he's like just completely messing up parts of his own story. I think he wanted to say like there was some like high level, but it's like maybe he was trying to say it was like the upper end of the spectrum. Maybe he was trying to say grams. We don't know. It just doesn't even matter. This is just like crazy stuff. You listen to this guy, I don't know, man. You got problems. Anyway, next up, different video. Check this one out. This is a long presentation. He's like got in front of all these people in this auditorium style setting, and he's just like bamboozling them like crazy. So this section, he is talking about how the fats are kind of like protective for your body, and he actually starts off by saying something that I agree with. So check this out.
You notice that in all the research there is out there, where do they find the largest concentrations of fat? I mean, the largest concentrations of poisons in the body, toxins, in the fat.
Yeah, that part I agree with. You find concentrated toxins in body fat. That's what happens. That's bioaccumulation. That's where like toxins are stored in the body, and when you eat animals and you eat animal products that contain lots of fat, you are ingesting super high levels of toxins, because that's how bioaccumulation works. You have like, a certain amount in the environment. You have like in the grass, in the air, there's like all sorts of poisons now all throughout our environment, sadly. And when you have an animal that's like say a cow eating grass, any of the residues that might just have fallen from the rain, even if it's organic, pasture-fed, grass-fed, everything, never saw a chemical in its life, it's still bioaccumulating toxins, just like all of us are, unfortunately, because we've just poisoned the world around us so much. So when the cow eats, I don't know however many, hundreds of pounds of, say, grass throughout its lifetime before you kill it and eat it, you are basically eating the equivalent of that toxin that it's bioaccumulated its whole life and stored in its body fat. There's actually a study that I've shown before in previous presentations that I've done, where you can see that human exposure to persistent organic pollutants occurs primarily through the consumption of animal fats like fatty fish, meat, and dairy products. If you could read through this study, it's actually close to around 95% of your persistent organic pollutants come from these animal products. So it's just an insane figure. You should not be eating animal fats. And then he goes on and talks about how, this is just like, you should be fat, and that, that's what protects you. And then he goes into this story about how he used to work at this like, this like hippie commune kind of place where they were originally vegetarians, but then they adopted his diet and they got all healthy and whatever. And he talks about this story about this biker dude who comes in for treatment and help from him, and the guy is like 50 whatever years old, and he's been leading a hard life of drugs and drinking, but his high body fat has protected him, because all these like toxic materials are stored in his body fat, and he's protected. And then he goes and he talks about how he's going to check out the guy's organs. Listen to what he says.
I said, I can see the damage that you did, yet iridologically, I could see that his glands and organs inside were relatively clean.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I said, I can see the damage that you did, yet iridologically, I could see that.
I couldn't understand that word he said. Let's hear it again.
Done alcohol and drugs for about 25 to 30 years. So I said, I can see the damage that you did, yet iridologically, I could see.
Iridologically. Iridologically, he can see that his organs were healthy. I have no idea what this word is. I've looked it up. I think he's talking about like he's done some kind of scan, maybe an x-ray, like radiation, irradiated. I know that word, irradiating or irradiated. I think that's what he's trying to say. but he's making up a word as far as I can see, as far as I can tell anyway. Like, I couldn't find any single reference to this online of what iridologically means. I think he's just making up stuff that just sounds kind of scientific or doctor-like. This guy is just like a piece of work, man. So anyway, so he's saying that the guy's organs are super great and healthy, and he looks like a 30-year-old, you know, on the inside, but on the outside he looks really bad because you can see all the damage of the cocaine and drugs and you know, booze. Crazy stuff. Anyway, next part. He's talking about body fat. He's saying how his BMI, his body fat percentage is, sorry, not BMI, his body fat percentage is around 26%, but that he doesn't look it, and he gives the reasons for why he doesn't look to be 26% body fat.
But I only look like I'm maybe 12, 15% body fat. Why? Because fat molecules, when they're raw, are small and tiny.
Interesting. So his fat molecules are small and tiny because they're raw. I think he's trying to convolute like this idea that he eats raw. So he eats raw fat molecules, and that's why his fat molecules are small. This is like, this has nothing to do. Your fat molecules are not changed by whether you eat raw or whether you eat cooked. Your fat molecules have nothing to do with what you eat. This is sort of like the idea of like, if you eat money, you're going to be rich. It's like you eat small fat molecules versus large fat molecules. It doesn't change the size of your fat molecules. It's like he's confusing things. I just can't understand how anybody listens to this guy. It's insane. I was just going on and on, like, there's so much. It's like a gold mine of craziness. Next thing, he's telling people how everybody should be fat, and he's talking like seriously fat, and he's telling people that they should be fat for at least two years or more, and then he basically says that people should keep their fat on for 30 years. Listen to why.
But I like people to keep fat on for 2.5 years. I would like people to be fat for 30 years. It takes 40 years, according to Pottinger's work and Howell's work, with animals that they got sick, to get to optimal health. It took 5 generations. 5 generations of animals.
He's talking about Pottinger. There's a very well known kind of like in the meat, raw meat, Primal Diet, whatever. The first I've heard about it actually was from Milk Jar, so that should tell you something. But basically these guys love to reference the work done by Pottinger on cats. There was this guy, he did some experiments, sounds pretty horrible and cruel. Read up on it if you're bored. But basically in a nutshell, he made all sorts of claims about how people should be eating raw meats, especially organ meats, and raw meat in general to be healthy, because he did all these experiments, and what he found was that when he was feeding cooked food to the cats, they were less healthy and they developed all sorts of degenerative diseases over the course of multiple generations versus the cats that got fed raw meat, and especially organ meats. And now we have Aajonus basically talking about how he wants people to stay fat for 30 years because that's how many generations it would take of your cells to regenerate. He's talking about animal experiments, which are already dubious at best. I've done a whole video about this. Check it out if you haven't seen it on my channel, about how animal testing is completely counterproductive in any kind of like medical testing for humans, for human use. It's just a horrible waste of time at best, and potentially could even be harmful because it could lead you to wrong conclusions, and there's a huge opportunity cost. But anyway, he's basically talking about a study that was completely unscientific, never corroborated, never like reproduced, and certainly never in people, only in the cats. And basically it's like the laughingstock of any serious scientific medical research person, and he's talking about that, and that's why he wants you to stay fat for 30 years. Crazy stuff. Next, he talks about blood sugar. He talks about his own example where his pancreas wasn't working, and he was diabetic as a youth, and after adopting his wonderful magical raw meat diet, he repaired his pancreas to the point that when he did his blood sugar test, check out his results.
But I did take the glucose tolerance test. So I was I was buzzed. But they never saw a pancreas take the sugar level all the way down to 54. Usually stops about 104.
Now that's really interesting. I was like, man, that sounds really low. I'm not too knowledgeable about blood sugar levels, but I said, that sounds really low. What is low blood sugar? Oh, anything below 70. He's saying he went down to 54. That's hypoglycemia. That's dangerous. You can pass out. You can have like serious health consequences from having blood sugar that low. And he's saying that he had that after he ingested the glucose test. It's like, how does anybody listen to this guy? I don't know. Next, this is probably the thing that got me the worst. He's talking about the Black Plague, so bubonic plague, and the cause of it. Check this out.
What happened with the Black Plague? What was the Black Plague about? An infectious disease? What were they burning in their homes, in their fireplaces, cooking with? Coal. Coal. The British government, French governments, all of them, especially British government, made coal available. What does coal have in its tar burning? Mercury.
You heard it first here. The bubonic plague, the Black Death, was not caused by a bacteria that we know about and we can study, and it's something that they can do a blood test and confirm that you have that bacteria present in your body. No. So reading stuff like this and looking at that and seeing that the bacteria is just a known cause of this illness. No, it's not this. It's mercury. It's mercury in the coal. Like, I flipped out when I heard this part. I was just like, wow, this guy is just completely nuts. And people listen to this. People listen to this and they buy into this guy. I couldn't believe it. Anyway, a little bit speechless. Next, and this is the last part, I promise. If you're not convinced that this guy's just a quack, check this part out. It talks about advanced glycation end products. There is a wonderful set of videos. There's actually a bunch of information put out on the nutritionfacts.org website by Dr. Greger about AGEs and their effects and how they cause inflammation and age your body and are really harmful and all this kind of stuff. And it's basically something that is found in foods. It can be increased and made worse by cooking, especially dry heat cooking. Makes the AGE content of food higher, generally speaking. And here is Aajonus talking about why you shouldn't eat carbohydrates.
The carbohydrates in the human system are a problem, according to Columbia University. They found that the human produces advanced glycation end products, AGE, and they do AGEs. What they do is they collect at a rate of 70 to 90%.
Then he just goes on and explains about how, clearly we're not meant to eat carbohydrates because they contribute to aging and inflammation and all this kind of stuff through these advanced glycation end products, AGEs, and how, you shouldn't be eating carbohydrates and instead you should be eating the raw meats and the animal products like dairy and all this kind of stuff. Well, like I said, check out nutritionfacts.org. You'll see a bunch of stuff where it is a legit thing, and it does age you. It causes Alzheimer's and a whole bunch of other kind of health problems. But you can also look up this study, which shows you a table of the AGE content of various foods. And they talk about various cooking methods and how things are made worse and how things could potentially, be cooked with less AGEs produced and all this kind of stuff. There's a few key points here to look at. Check out, where it is, I didn't highlight it, here it is. Animal-derived foods that are high in fat and protein are generally AGE-rich and prone to new AGE formation during cooking. Now, Aajonus does try to tell you that, eat the meat raw because if you cook it, it makes it worse. That's true, but here the main point. In contrast, carbohydrate-rich foods such as vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and milk contain relatively few AGEs even after cooking. Okay, so, skip the milk, obviously, this isn't the only thing to consider for health, but it's basically, they're saying directly, carbohydrate-rich foods contain relatively few AGEs, even after cooking. It's a direct lie. He's saying the exact opposite of the truth. And if you look into this guy, the more you look into it, the more you'll see that that is what's happening. He is just a liar through and through. I don't, say this kind of stuff lightly, but this guy literally tells you the opposite of the truth, and people are sitting there gawking, listening to him like he's, telling them something, wonderful. So anyway, I realize this is a bit long. I don't know, hopefully you enjoyed it. I just found that, listening to this guy is just, I don't know, mind-bending, but not in a good way. All I can say is, if you have people like Sverge, looking up to this guy, I can now kind of start to understand where he gets some of his own crazy ideas from, and, where it, kind of pushes people to do these kind of extreme things, and why they think that it's a good, diet to follow, and why it's healthy. So, yeah, I guess choose your company wisely, and, look into this stuff yourself. This information is readily available. Go out there and check it for yourself. I hope you guys enjoyed this collaboration. I certainly did. Definitely subscribe to both Plantain and Logan's channel if you guys haven't, signed up for that yet. Both of them have great content up. It was great to work together. If anybody else, wants to work together on some similar kind of videos, do let me know. And hope to see you guys in the next one. Bye.